And now, your go-to source for year-round fantasy hockey advice, DFS, and betting coverage. This is NHL Fantasy on Ice, presented by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL.
As per usual, it's been a chaotic and unpredictable start to the NHL season, brought to you by our good friends over at Skip. Welcome to another edition of NHL Fantasy on Ice. Nick Alberga and Jay Kahn with you. Plenty ahead on today's episode. You'll hear from Pete Jensen. Also, in addition, answer some of your mailbag questions. We'll discuss some early season standouts, injury news, and we'll get to some betting plays a bit later on. What's going on, Jake? How are you, bud?
I'm doing good. Better than my goaltending categories in fantasy hockey right now, Nick. And good to have you back from your early season contract holdout. We got you back in the mix here. Of course, this episode brought to you by Skip as well. So good to get into things with you. And I'm ready to overreact. I know you're big on overreacting, just like me.
Yes, and the latest, I rejected the Igor Shesterkin 8 years, $11 million per season contract. But you're right, man. It's been nuts. At least the games here in North America, you got 2 6-0 games. You got 3 games with 10+ goals. It's had a bit of everything, but very unpredictable from the betting lens as well, too.
It has been. I mean, I think this is the time of year. We could get into some betting picks a little later in the show, some spots maybe we could target over the next couple of days. But I do tend to like to gravitate towards the road teams. I think it can be difficult to play on home ice. And, you know, you got to, like, the Habs are bringing out the popcorn guy and the hot dog guy and the beer guy. Like, they're introducing every single player. So I think it can freeze them a little bit. But obviously, they get off to the big start. So I don't know if there's any storylines, Nick, that stand out to you the most. Like, is there a couple goaltenders? Are you all in on Montembeault now all of a sudden after that performance against the Maple Leafs on Wednesday night?
Pretty impressive, but to me, the biggest story was the statement victory by the Vegas Golden Knights coming out against the Colorado Avalanche and definitively proving to fantasy owners that Alexander Georgiev, Jake, not that guy. I wondered coming into the season, I know it's one start, but what an eruption offensively by Vegas to start.
Is it already Justus Ennunen season in Colorado? Are we already going there a game into the season? And the Vegas side of it too, Nick, right? I think, I mean, I looked at Eichel as a guy that could really break out this season and have that, 100-point year. Obviously, he gets off to a good start. There's a couple of other, line mates in that top 6 we can get into, a Barbashev. Can we finally trust Mark Stone as well? I wanted to ask you that because we know the story with Mark Stone. He gets off to a good start as well. He's playing for them to start the season. Are we always just going to feel a little bit uneasy rostering him in fantasy, knowing he could find himself on LTIR at any minute?
I think so. I mean, the body of work is there with Mark Stone. He's had a really, really strong career, but obviously injuries are always going to be part of sort of the package you get with Mark Stone in fantasy hockey. But I think the thing that scares fantasy owners, he'll have these efforts like the ones, they have in the first game of the season. You're like, wow, this guy can still bring it. But I just don't see a scenario where Mark Stone's playing 82 games per season. And I think from a fantasy perspective, I want somebody who's reliable. And that's why this guy continues to dip in drafts every year. Like, I think if you to compare him to Ivan Barbashev, maybe you lean more towards Barbashev and maybe it's a recency thing, Jay, because he gets 2-2 in the opener. Like, who saw that coming from Barbashev?
I mentioned Barbashev on our last episode, just very quickly, as somebody that's looks like they're getting a good line assignment. And look, Vegas has depth issues, Nick. You know this all too well. And Eichel, Stone, they're great players, but who else is going to step up in this lineup with Marchessault gone? So there's opportunities here. Barbashev, Victor Olofsson's another one of those guys you almost forget. Okay, he's on Vegas this year, like he's out of that mix in Buffalo and getting an opportunity on that first power play. So do you have more interest in Olofsson or Barbashev based on what you saw through one game?
Probably Barbashev, longer sample size. It's going to take me a bit of time to get reacclimated, if you will, with a Victor Olofsson, who early on in his career was all over on the waiver wire. In fact, I had him on a couple of my fantasy rosters, but I just think he hasn't shown that consistency. So I want to see that. But that's perfect, perfect little segue to Anthony Mantha and the Gordie Howe hat trick he has in the opener. You want to talk about wild and chaotic. That game between Vancouver and Calgary was something else. Connor Zary, the OT winner, he was fantastic. But Anthony Mantha, seeing what we saw in the opener, I'm starting to get a bit more interested, Jake, but I have to see a couple efforts like that first.
Well, Anthony Mantha comes with caution tape wrapped around him in fantasy hockey. Like, beware of what you're getting into here. But the difference in Mantha now compared to Mantha, what, 5, 6 years ago when we were really excited about him is 5, 6 years ago, you had to spend a draft pick on him. Now he's just sort of a waiver wire guy. So I don't think there's as much risk involved in grabbing a Mantha and seeing where it can go. It's amazing what he can do, Nick. That goal he scored, he comes out of the penalty box, he goes all the way down the ice, great finish, and you think this could be a special player, and then he goes on a milk carton for like 2 or 3 weeks. So I certainly don't trust him to do it consistently, but look good, and we're looking for players in that top six in Calgary to step up and get some opportunity. Connor Zary, another one, great OT winner last night.
Yeah, not to mention Igor Sharangovich is week to week with a lower body injury. So somebody across that lineup needs to step up for the Calgary Flames. But yeah, I often wondered in fantasy hockey who uses the watch list. I think Anthony Mantha is a perfect guy to put on your watch list right now. A really, really good start with the Gordie hat trick against the Vancouver Canucks in the opener. One thing I do love, as you guys know on this podcast, Jake, contract year files. And some of these guys off to a blistering start. Mikko Rantanen, a Hattie. Shea Theodore, who I really identified as a guy, a defenseman I wanted in my draft, gets 3 apples in that opener. Sam Bennett, 2 goals, 4 shots on goal, 2 hits, 2 blocks. Brock Besser, all this guy does is score on opening night. Who out of those 4 really impressed you in the opener?
I sneaky like Sam Bennett a lot. I was actually able to grab him off a wire in a pretty deep league before the season started. And I thought this, for a guy that's playing in top 6 on a really good team in the Florida Panthers, to me, that feels like a bit of value. I'd even throw Mitch Marner out there as well. Nick, I know he didn't factor in on the score sheet in opening night, but 6 shots on goal. Is Marner all of a sudden going to be shot guy in contract year? Maybe he's a guy you could look to via trade if the slow start continues in terms of the point production, because I think eventually he's going to pop and have a big year. But Brock Besser in a good spot in that lineup as well. And I love me some contract year Shea Theodore. As long as he's getting some power play time there in Vegas, I think he could be very, very effective in fantasy hockey.
He is going to get paid big time coming up next spring. I don't know if Vegas is going to be that team. You can never count that team out because they always find a way to keep a guy if they want to. But we saw 3 shutouts as we referenced. Shesterkin, Hellebuck, and Montembeault. By far, I think Montembeault was the big story because this guy is steadily available on the waiver wire. I'd take a dip right now. I mean, the Four Nations is coming up. It's pretty wide open when it comes to goaltending, but I was really, really impressed with his opener against the Maple Leafs.
He looked so comfortable. Like, I know the Leafs peppered him with rubber, and there were some high danger chances. I mean, that the Matthews chance at the end of the game, I thought for sure he was scoring. He actually threw it right into the chest of Montembeault. So I don't know how much credit I'll give Montembeault for that one, but the rest of the game, he looked completely comfortable. So you get that confidence early in the season. You shut out a dangerous offensive team like the Maple Leafs. That can go a long way. So like you said, on the wire, maybe a bit of value there. One of the other shutouts, Nick, was Igor, obviously against the Pittsburgh Penguins. But I kind of want to focus more on the Penguins angle of this. Are they just going to be a complete disaster this year, or are we reading too much into one game against what I think will be an excellent Rangers team?
Jakey, I'm big into October baseball. It's like a guy tipping his pitch, and the next pitch goes 450 feet out of the park, and see you later, the New York Mets off the division series. I think the Pittsburgh Penguins foreshadowed a season that's just going to be terrible for them. I think the New York Rangers are an excellent team, but to come out and lay a goose egg that bad for a team like Pittsburgh, who needed a good start, you have the momentum, the Crosby extension, and that's the way they come out, Jake. I am scared beyond belief for that organization and their fan base, man.
I think they could be really bad this year. I do. It's unfortunate because I love Sid so much, and I don't want to see him just, wane out the rest of his career on a team that, I mean, could be getting closer and closer to a draft lottery type conversation. Maybe they won't be that bad. I still do think there's some fantasy value there, though, Nick. You can play that doom and gloom angle where, okay, team's not great, they're not winning, but there's still going to be some guys that step up in the lineup and score. I do like Brian Rust when he gets back from injury. I just don't know how long that's going to take, but outside of that, just not a lot of excitement in that Penguins lineup right now.
Like, I even see a guy like Evgeny Malkin, who has been a staple in fantasy hockey, under 60% rostered right now. Like, I just don't believe in anybody in that team outside of Sidney Crosby. Like, Gensel's gone now. I'm going nowhere near their crease. I can't remember a time where I look at Pittsburgh, Jake, and I'm like, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, well, this is probably it now. I think we've gotten to that point where, okay, enough is enough. Obviously, you're going to roster Sid. I mean, you mentioned Gino. outside of a deep league, I don't really have a whole lot of interest there either. He just looks old and he doesn't look like the old Geno Malkin anymore. So would love to see a Rucker McGroarty step up or something like that and, have at least one good fantasy story in Pittsburgh this year. But they're a team not only I'm avoiding in fantasy hockey, but I think we got to look to maybe fade them a little bit in the betting market. I was on the Rangers in that first game. Pittsburgh plays again on Thursday night. I think we're back to fading the Pens again, Nick.
I think so, my friend. Last but not least, I waited about 10 minutes here. We have to get to the Utah Hockey Club. What a start for them. I thought they tried their best to give Chicago that game late, but I know you want to talk about Dylan Guenther here.
I can talk about Dylan Guenther the whole episode. I mean, this kid is unbelievable. The second that he gets the puck in the O zone, he's looking to shoot it, and we saw it on that first goal that he scored in that game in Utah, get the crowd going. So this kid loves to rip it. He was already one of my favorite shot prop guys, but I think that number's going to continue to climb as we go on here. He's frisky, as we like to say, Nick. He's loving the shots right now. A couple goals. I mean, sky's the limit. I think if he can put together a healthy season, I'm projecting 35 goals at least for Dylan Guenther in that offense.
Getting soggy with it. We love it. Watch out for Connor Ingram in between the pipes as well. I own him on a fantasy roster, and I think there's a lot of value in him. And Barrett Hayton is a guy. Barrett Hayton's a guy on not on many rosters right now. I think I would look at right now with a fine-tooth comb and say, hey, if this continues, I'm picking him up, albeit he's a center, 1 goal, 1 assist, 3 shots on goal in the opener against Chicago for Utah.
All right, Nick, let's get to some mailbag questions here with one of our favorites, Pete Jensen. Of course, brought to you by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL. We've got some great mailbag questions this week. Pete, thanks for jumping in, bud.
Yeah, of course. Some good news on the injury front in terms of guys that are going to be ready for opening night. And we got a bunch of questions about Matt Boldy, including one, who would you rather have, Timo Meier or Matt Boldy for points the rest of the season? We got a Caulfield versus Boldy question. We also got just in general, what are your projections for Matt Boldy? I've seen some sites out there project him for like 90 plus points. That might be a little high in my book.
Yeah, it probably is, guys, but I'm a big Matt Boldy guy. Health is going to be of vast concern, I think, with any player in this league, but namely Boldy. I always wonder, Jake, about guys starting the season injured, how long it takes them to catch up, but they are chaotic games in October, so I think there's more ice out there. How do you feel about Boldy?
I like Boldy this year. I like his spot in that lineup. I think Minnesota a little bit underrated in general. I think there's a little bit of value in the Wild. So it's time for Boldy to step up and really do something in that offense. So I think ceiling 90 points makes a lot of sense to me.
Jake, I see and hear you everywhere. Philip Gustafson is on your radar this season. Okay, I got you in fantasy leagues left and right. I'm listening to NHL Network Radio. You're just pimping Minnesota. So if you call your shot, you love to see it. Speaking of calling your shot, I think it's hilarious. The Ottawa Senators agreed to an extension with Linus Ullmark, but Joey Daccord, Pete, out in Seattle, gets a pretty lucrative extension from where he was a couple years ago. Got a question. Is Joey Daccord a sleeper? I think unequivocally, Pete.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the guy played 50 games last year, only had 19 wins because the team didn't really give him much goal support, unfortunately. But I'm excited to see what he could do over the course of the season in building off of that, getting more goal support after the additions, right, of Chandler Stevenson, Brandon Montour, Shane Wright for a full season. That's going to boost the offense. I was not thrilled with what I saw, I'll be honest, with them against the St. Louis Blues, giving up those 3 goals in a hurry in that one stretch. I'm not sold on the Kraken as a playoff team, but I think Daccord returns value in the late rounds.
Nick, what about a little Ducks question here from one of our listeners? Will Vetrano or Gauthier have a better year for the Ducks? Do you go with the option that you've seen in Vetrano, or you go for the unknown in Cutter Gauthier, the rookie?
I'm going to go with Frankie Vetrano. I think the NHL is a difficult league to play in. I know it's out there. I love a bit of the swag on Cutter Gauthier calling his shot, saying, I want out of Philadelphia, goes to Anaheim. But I think Vetrano, the resume's building and building and building. On top of that, I think he is playing for a way out maybe in Anaheim. I think there's a point in time over the next year where he's dealt. I got pretty close from my understanding in the summer. But I just like the track record, Pete, a bit more than a guy like Cutter Gauthier. I think there's going to be moments throughout the season where you realize, yeah, he's pretty young in this league, although he's got a pretty bright future, I would say.
In terms of goal scoring and peripheral coverage, hits, blocked shots for a forward, like there weren't that many players last year that were better than Frank Vetrano. So he's one of the biggest steals across the board. The Ducks are still probably going to be near the bottom of the team, bottom 5, I would say. but I think he's pretty safe from a category coverage standpoint. I love Leo Carlson. I love if he's playing with Gauthier. I love some of the line combinations, but I'm just not sold on that team having staying power in fantasy just yet.
We got a listener question asking if they should keep Josh Norris or not. Nick, I don't know if you have any takes on Ottawa in general. Maybe, Norris, David Perron. Like there's a couple of interesting names in that lineup outside of the big boys. Is there interest for you in that top six for the Sens this year?
It is the old wait and see approach, boys. Similar to Buffalo, you guys all know my stance on them. You're going to be stunned. That's something I say a bit later on in this podcast, by the way. But Ottawa and Buffalo, Ottawa specifically, a wait and see approach. The major files, yeah, you're going to be all over. But guys like Norris, I just don't know what to expect. And I'm so tired of getting burned that I'm just going to chill out. There's some other guys who have drafted I have a bit more faith in. The waiver wire is going to be your friend in the next couple of weeks. But Pete, I just don't know which way I'm going to sway on Ottawa. I'm taking a wait and see approach to start here.
I mean, they've had so much more hype than a team like the Ducks, but I just need to see some of these teams play for a couple of games before I have any level of trust in a Sharks or a Ducks or a Senators. I guess I liked what I saw from the back end standpoint from Montreal, but even without Laine, like I feel like that team, the verdict's still out on them. So I'm just not touching those bottom dweller teams. I need to see the usage. I need to see if Tyler Toffoli's playing 20 minutes a game or if Leo Carlson's playing, around that number, stuff like that. You need to see the usage first before you invest in the bad teams out there.
I agree. Speaking of bad teams, the Philadelphia Flyers, at least in my opinion, Pete, I know you were big on that team that made me make the playoffs last year. They fell short, but Matvei Michkov, one of our questions, your predictions, your projections for Matvei Michkov this season. Jake, we'll start with you.
I take offense to the Flyers as a bad team, Nick. I'm in on the Flyers this year. They're going to push for a playoff spot, I think. So we'll see. We'll follow that as the season goes along. It's very early here, but it's tough to project rookies. And again, I'm not a guy that likes to get too enamored with things I see in the preseason, but he looks like he's got a lot of talent. If he doesn't end up in Torts doghouse, which is very likely the first couple weeks of the season, I don't know, 50, 55 points, something in that range. I think he could be one of those rookies. I wouldn't go too crazy with it, though, because there's always growing pains. You mentioned it earlier, Nick. This is a tough place when we talked about Cutter Gauthier for kids to come in and play. So 50, 55 points, I think, is a pretty good ceiling for Michkov this year.
And we had them at NHL.com. You could still find our point win projections on NHL.com/fantasy. We had him for right around 60. Same place as, Stankoven. Stankoven, by the way, is a beast. He led the entire NHL in shots on goal in the preseason with 26. There was no one even close to him. So I still think Stankoven is the best pick for the Calder Trophy and to lead rookies in points from that Dallas offense. But Michkov's going to be right on his tail. If it works out with Torts, 30-plus goals, 60-plus points. That's what I'm predicting.
In general, the injury bug has been crazy, namely in between the pipes, Jake. Joseph Woll doesn't even get to the season opener. Reminds me of last year, Game 7, nowhere to be seen. But right away, from a fantasy perspective, you're looking for injury replacements. Look no further than the guy behind him, Anthony Stolarz, I thought was really, really solid in his Maple Leafs debut on Wednesday night.
He looked really good, only gives up the one goal to Cole Caulfield. I thought, as much as the Leafs probably carried most of the play in that game, there was also chances for Montreal to go up 2 or 3, and Stolarz kept the Leafs in it and gave them a chance to come back and tie the game. So I like him. He's a guy that's, played. He's had NHL experience. He's been comfortable, high-pressure situations. So I love that look, Nick. Honestly, I would rather have Joe Woll sitting on my IR than me starting Stuart Skinner on Wednesday. At least he's not hurting me on the IR, right? I'm not. My goaltending categories aren't rinsed for the entire week. So Skinner, that was a rough opening night for him, and that's kind of been old hat in Edmonton. It feels like every single year.
It's 2 years in a row that Skinner got absolutely rinsed in the season opener, if you recall, last year against the Vancouver Canucks. Scary stuff, but I have not lost faith through one game in the Edmonton Oilers. By the way, a little sprinkle, a little dabble. Do not sleep on the name Dennis Hildeby. I don't know if he's going to make his debut on Thursday against New Jersey. This guy's the real deal, and he's also really, really large. He's a large man, just like Anthony Stolarz, but the future looks pretty bright from a Hildeby standpoint here, Jake.
The Hildebeest, as they call him.
Yes.
So, yeah, maybe going to get an opportunity, especially if Woll can't stay healthy. Like if we're already talking about him on the IR, if that's going to be something that happens consistently throughout the course of the season, then he might get some opportunity. I've mentioned on a few of the other episodes, Jesper Wallstedt in Minnesota, he gets paid about a week ago as well. I think Minnesota's going to want to see what they have in this kid. So he might be somebody as an injury replacement, not getting a lot of starts, but I think if he can prove himself in the couple starts he gets early on, maybe those start shares go up. So Wallstedt would be a guy in a deeper league I would look to here.
These three goalie systems in the NHL are killing fantasy hockey. I'm profoundly saying that. But again, to sum up loose parts, Samuel Montembeault is probably the guy you want to pick up if you're looking for an injury replacement, whether it comes to UC Saros, who's dinged up right now, or obviously Joseph Wall going to miss at least 2 more games. Montembeault's my guy, under 40% utilized at time of having this conversation. Connor Ingram with Utah, Philip Gustafson with Minnesota, Ilya Samsonov with Vegas. I think it's always turbulent with him, but there's some options early on in the season, Jake.
Well, what's happening in the Detroit crease? You mentioned three-headed monsters. Like I mean, it's not a crease I'm excited to back in general, or a team I'm excited to back in general. But like, are we expecting Ville Husso to bounce back? They wanted him to be the guy there. Cam Talbot, he's like 105 years old. So I don't know. I don't know where that Detroit crease is going, but maybe you can dig deep and find some value. Alex Lyon, he's a guy that's popped a little bit at times. Tough to figure out the crease there, but you might be able to mine a little bit of value if one of these guys gets hot.
I agree. More of a wait and see approach. Obviously, we want to see what Detroit brings to the table the first couple of games. At the very least, monitor that. We talked about Yegor Sharangovich earlier on, week-to-week lower body injury. Naturally, Connor Zary right away playing with Backlund and Coleman on PP1 as well. A goal and an assist. What a pretty OT winner for Zary in that one, Jake.
He bailed out Backlund as well, Nick. I don't know if you were watching that game. Backlund had a great shot at the empty net. I believe it was Quinn Hughes that got in front of it, and then Vancouver goes right down and ties the game. So all is forgotten because they get the 2 points in that one. So Backlund can maybe take Zary out for a little steak dinner or something like that. But he looks legit. I mean, we saw the move he made in 3-on-3 overtime. I think he's a guy that needs to get more top 6 minutes and power play time, and if he gets it, he can run with it.
Man, I had a Huberdeau, JT Miller, Kuzmenko parlay shot prop, and I needed one more Kuzmenko shot, and he had a 2-on-1, and he passed the puck. The guy never passes the puck. He passes the puck on the 2-on-1, so I didn't hit. But anyways, externally, Pavel Buchnevich, Matt Duchene, Victor Arvidsson, the aforementioned Kuzmenko. There are options to replace Sharangovich, which is good. Early on in the season, there's a lot of fruit on that waiver wire.
You mentioned Arvidsson. He's a guy I'm really excited about if he can stay healthy this year. I've always been a huge fan of his game, and that second line that Edmonton's thrown out there to start the season. I know they got shut out in the first game, but Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Skinner, I saw a little something from that line. So don't freak out too much that they got shut out. I think if that line sticks together, both Skinner and Arvidsson can have a lot of success playing on the wing with Leon Draisaitl.
It is time for producer Bob Bender's favorite time of the podcast, the betting scope in the NHL world. Week 1, here we go as we bring back Pete Jensen for his pick of the night. Pete, give us a winner, buddy. Come on.
I'll go from my neck of the woods here. New York Islanders, they play the Utah Hockey Club. So Utah's playing a real team tonight. Not to knock Chicago too much, but the Islanders offense looks better here with Anthony Duclair playing with Bo Horvat and Matthew Barzal. Remember how good that line was last year. So I'm going for Bo Horvat either to score a goal or a power play point here. First unit also includes Siplikov, the guy that Leboff really likes.
From my perspective, Thursday night card, you referenced it, pretty busy. The Sheldon Keefe revenge game, Jake, I'll be looking at that. I think the Maple Leafs bounce back, and I'm going to play the layoff for New Jersey, returning after sweeping the Buffalo Sabres overseas. So I like the Leafs on the money line. And I talked about Buffalo, a must win in game 3 of the season. They're playing the LA Kings. I am riding the Buffalo Sabres tonight, Jake. Famous last words, my friend.
Yeah, I've been there, done that before. I don't know if I can do that again, so I wish you all the best. The Kings can be a pretty good road team. Buffalo also coming back, right? You mentioned New Jersey coming back from that trip. That can be a bit of a difficult spot, but the Sabres should be desperate. I'm just going to take the champs, guys. The Florida Panthers only -135 against the Ottawa Senators. I know Ottawa should be desperate to get out to a good start here, and I mean, you could argue maybe there's a bit of a letdown for Florida after raising the banner. I just think they're a significantly better team. So in another version of the Kachuk Bowl, expect some shenanigans between the whistles, but I think the Panthers get things done against an inferior opponent.
Guys, you are already on the betting market just a couple of days into the season. Are you touching Macklin Celebrini? He's healthy for his NHL debut on Thursday against the St. Louis Blues at home. He's playing with William Eklund and Tyler Toffoli. Not a bad line there.
It isn't. I'm just scared about St. Louis. I just think they're a low scoring type team. And I think if I'm looking for offense, it's probably not like a St. Louis San Jose game. Another wait and see guy. I know a lot of people high on Celebrini. I have more interest in Michkov. I just think there's a bit more flash. There's a bit more around him in Philadelphia. So I'll probably steer clear of that game to start. Along those lines, you got Vancouver, Philadelphia on Friday. Michkov's debut. I'm going to be playing the shot prop, the point prop. I think he has a hot debut to start things off. And you can't forget of over the weekend as well, Jake. We got Chicago and Edmonton. I'm going to have some fun. How about Bedard and McDavid to score in the same game?
Oh, okay. I like that. The great one, or well, I don't even know what we're calling him at this point, but
The next
whatever.
one.
With the next one is McDavid, but then I don't know what Bedard is, so it gets a little bit confusing with these nicknames. But both excellent players, and yeah, I don't mind that look. I also don't mind the angle, and you kind of brought it up a little bit. Teams that have played already have played a game or two under their belt against a team that hasn't played. I think there is a bit of an advantage to that early in the season, and you can back those teams that, okay, they got their legs underneath them, they've played a regular season game, that intensity, and you can maybe catch a team napping who hasn't played yet to start the year.
Okay, I haven't gotten a chance to get to this. Listeners have been hitting me up. They want the old Bob Bender NHL Futures Report, all action. I got a 4-pack of future Stanley Cup winners, and we're going to start with Edmonton plus 750, Toronto plus 1400, New York Rangers plus 1400 as well, Vegas at plus 1750. I'm tailing my guy Tim Kalinowski. I think Vegas at that price is a great price. Peter, real quick, any loose ends, anything with the injuries you want to get to, and then we will put a bow on it.
Yeah, I mean, if UC Saros isn't playing Thursday, that kind of came out of nowhere, right? We were all worried about Swayman near the top of the goalie rankings, but we got Saros number 2. I picked him to win the Vezina. He might not be healthy for the opener. Get all over Dallas, especially that third line. Jamie Benn, Maverick Bourque, and Logan Stankoven. That's a keeper right there.
Sounds good. And maybe there's a potential for like a Scott Wedgwood revenge game off the opener, Jake. Oh, here we go.
You know I'm here for revenge. Early in the season, mid-season, late season, playoff revenge. I'm here for it. And hey, we're always looking for goaltending starts, as that's been a theme on this podcast, and I think it's going to be the theme on many episodes as we move along here.
Indeed, lots coming up from us. Coming up on Monday, Week 2 Waiver Wire Edition. Also, make sure to go back and check out the Week 1 Waiver Wire Edition, also the season preview. That's going to do it for us. Thanks to producer Bob Bender, for Jake Hahn and Pete Jensen. I'm Nick Alberga. You've been listening to NHL Fantasy on Ice, delivered by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL.